Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Thursday, March, 5th. It's finally March, and we are going to talk about LEED for planning, what planners need to know. This is going to be a great session. We have well over 800 folks registered for this, so this is going to be an important topic that we're discussing today. So if you have any technical issues, you can type those in the Q&A box and I'll do my best to answer those. For your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type them in the Q&A box and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Oh, and it'll be helpful to, if you type in who you'd like to answer the question, if there's someone specific. Today, our guest host is the APA Sustainable Communities Division. So thank you, as always, for bringing your timely and important sessions here to the webcast series. Today's session is going to be approved for 1.5 CM credits and one of the Sustainability and Resilience credits. And you'll be able to log those by visiting planning.org, log into your My APA account, and from there you can search by the title or event number, both of which can be found on our website, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. A quick update from APA. Due to the technology upgrade at the end of 2025, the CM grace period has been extended to May 31st, 2026, which will provide additional time to our members to get those AICP credits logged. So just as an FYI, if you are having any issues with logging your credits or getting into your profile, you can email aicpcm@planning.org. Okay, if you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes, when new sessions are available for you to register for, and a weekly reminder of what's on tap. We record all of our sessions and we post them to our YouTube channel. So head over to youtube.com/planningwebcast. Will pop up along with our well over 500 session recordings, all available to you for free. So please be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notified when a new session recording has been uploaded. Last thing on my to-do list here with you is we have a mailing list. I send one email a month. I repeat, only one at the top of each month. And it's just a reminder of the sessions that are coming up that you can register for, whether any of them are for those required CM credits, and also a list of our on-demand sessions that are available for you to register for. So either head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast or scan that QR code to sign up for that mailing list. All right, that's the end of my housekeeping items. I'm going to turn it over here to Tyler in a moment. And again, if you have questions for our panelists, just type them into the Q&A. Our friend Anna is going to moderate the Q&A here at the end. Tyler, take it away.
Great, thanks, Christine. Wait for the slides to get pulled up and then we'll get going. Perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to LEED V5 for planning. What do planners need to know? We are excited to walk you through this massive shift in our industry. We have translated concepts in LEED V5, which is often viewed as a building scale standard, into a set of big ideas relevant to urban and regional planners. And we'll also share a few real-world examples and have a couple of tools for you to try out to keep things engaging throughout this presentation. Next slide. By the end of today, you'll understand the core themes of LEED V5, how mandatory carbon, climate, and human impact assessments fit into your work, and walk away with 5 big ideas you can apply directly to your projects. But first, let us introduce ourselves and give you an outline of what's to come. My name is Tyler Friedman, and I'm a co-chair of the Students and Emerging Professionals Committee with APA Sustainable Communities Division. I'm a soon-to-be graduate from UC Santa Barbara and a current LEED Green Associate. This webinar is in partnership with Evolve EA, an award-winning organization focused at the intersection of sustainability and the built environment. From Evolve EA, I'm joined by Grace Cameron and Meghna Roy. Grace Cameron is a sustainability consultant and project manager specializing in high performance buildings, green building certifications, and sustainable infrastructure. She works with design teams, developers, and public agencies to integrate practical sustainability strategies that improve environmental performance, occupant well-being, and long-term resilience. Meghna is a project manager for the Climate and Sustainability Studio at Evolve EA. She is currently involved in climate action plans, transition plans, and large-scale energy analysis for campus portfolios. She is currently joining us from Pittsburgh and has a background in architecture and a master's in sustainable design from Carnegie Mellon University. I would like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that the chat will be active throughout the presentation as well as Q&A, and we encourage you to ask questions and respond to engagement activities, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as the presentation progresses. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Grace to speak more to the why of this presentation before I give a brief introduction to the LEED framework as a whole.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tyler. This is a really great opportunity. At Evolve, we've been tracking the new updates in LEED version 5. The drafts were released last year. Now you are free to register to V5, so it's really an exciting time to dig into this. So I wanted to jump right in. So why does LEED matter to planners? Really, you all know and understand that planners shape the future, and you do so by influencing key areas of sustainability. So whether it's land use and zoning decisions, thinking about transportation and mobility, how people get around, how they get to your site, your development, natural systems protection, community well-being and resilience, and then of course policy and governance structure. So LEED as a framework provides structured guidance and really is a best practice framework for benchmarking your decisions around critical plans and development projects. Turning it back to Tyler, we'll talk a bit about what LEED is and how it's structured.
Great, thank you, Grace. So LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design and is the most widely recognized green building rating system in the world. LEED offers a framework for healthy, efficient, and cost-effective buildings, resulting in environmental and social benefits. It serves as a globally recognized symbol of sustainability leadership for design, construction, operations, and community development. Next slide. LEED is for all project types and phases. There are primarily 6 rating systems that operate within the LEED V5 ecosystem. Building design and construction is applied to new commercial construction or major renovations. Interior design and construction is for commercial interior fit-outs without extending beyond the building envelope. Building operations and maintenance are for existing buildings going under little improvements or constructions with an emphasis on enhancing effective building operations. Neighborhood development is for new land development projects or redevelopment projects containing residential, non-residential, or mixed-use spaces, and this can occur at any stage of the development process. LEED for homes promotes the design and construction of high-performance homes for residential properties, while LEED for cities and communities is used to measure and manage waste consumption, water consumption, energy use, transportation, and human experience at the municipal level. By offering different rating systems, LEED allows developers, architects, planners, and governments the ability to implement sustainability strategy throughout the entire life cycle of the built environment. Next slide. In terms of structure, there are typically 8 main categories, although these can vary slightly depending on the rating system. Integrated process serves to engage different stakeholders and encourage collaboration amongst professional disciplines. Ideally, this process is used to look for sustainability strategies that offer synergies or multiple benefits between credit categories. Location and transportation focuses on choosing sites that reduce transportation impacts and awards projects that are near public transit and walkable areas or provide alternatives to single occupancy vehicles, such as bike infrastructure and electric vehicle charging. Sustainable sites addresses how the building interacts with its surrounding environment. The available credits work to mitigate ecological disturbance, manage stormwater runoff, reduce heat island effects, and design landscapes that support environmental health. Water efficiency promotes water use reduction, both indoor and outdoor. Strategies include high-efficiency fixtures, rainwater management, and systems that reduce reliance on potable water consumption. Energy and atmosphere is one of the most heavily weighted categories and also all about reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. Credits reward energy efficiency, commissioning systems to ensure performance, and the use of renewable energy. The materials and resources section encourages responsible material selection and waste reduction. Emphasis is placed on recycled or responsibly sourced materials, selecting products with environmental transparency, such as environmental product declarations, and minimizing construction waste. Indoor environmental quality focus on the human aspect and the occupant health and comfort. Looking at credits like daylight access, thermal comfort, acoustic performance, and indoor air quality ensure that individuals within the space are exposed to the best experience possible. Innovation, finally, provides opportunities for projects to earn points by going above and beyond. These can occur by implementing innovative strategies that aren't specifically covered in any of the existing credit categories, or by achieving exemplary performance relative to the existing credit thresholds. Following the submittal of all LEED materials, projects are awarded different levels of certification based on their point total, with the lowest threshold being certified at 40 points and the highest threshold being platinum certified at 80 points. Next slide, please. So now we are seeing a shift from points to impact. Every LEED project wants points, and you look at the scorecard and you work with your project team to select credits and strategies where you think you can get the most points. However, in V5, the weighting of these points has shifted, where now each individual strategy and point relates to a specific impact area. The three impact areas shown here are decarbonization, quality of life, and ecological conservation. Decarbonization is going to account for 50% of the credits, of the points that you can obtain. And this is the heavy hitter of both operational and embodied carbon. Quality of life is going to focus on health, equity, and human experience, while ecological conservation is going to focus on restoration, biodiversity, and water. Functionally, this means that every project has a scorecard and now a new impact report alongside that. This is not an extra calculation you need to do. Your selected points roll up to prove performance against these three goals. Bottom line, impact over points. Now that you have a foundational understanding of the structure of LEED, how it addresses sustainability, and how certifications are awarded, I'm going to hand it over to Grace to speak more to the fine details of V5 and the applications it has in planning.
Great, thank you, Tyler. Shifting now to the evolution of LEED. So key changes in version 5. LEED has gone through a number of iterations since it was developed. Largely now, there are some major shifts that we want to bring to your attention. So first and foremost, LEED is a carbon-first structure. So you saw with those point weightings that 50% of points throughout the framework do come from strategies that are directly tied to decarbonization. But the value of LEED is also in that it's holistic. So green buildings or green development, as it's commonly understood, typically brings to mind energy and water efficiency and resource efficiency more broadly. But in V5, LEED is changing that definition now and broadening it out to also mean climate resiliency. So we're going to dig into what that means and how it's defined. Also, human impacts are now considered as part of a new prerequisite requirement. When we think about how our design affects people and communities that we serve, the population groups to consider are now more broad in scope. So not just who uses your space or who uses the building, but what about the workers who have helped to construct the facility? What about workers who were involved in producing the materials that went into your design? So again, this broader context window that LEED V5 is introducing. It's also focused on equity, so equitable and connected communities, and how our planning and design decisions can really influence that. There is also a shift from the concept of conservation and protection to ecological restoration, so actively restoring our sites. Then the last big shift here is as LEED covers the full spectrum of a project from inception to ultimate delivery and occupancy, the new metrics and ways that credits are awarded in V5 are really geared more towards performance. So it's not just the intent of a design or the intent of a plan, but how does it actually perform and function against our goals. So we want to share with you all today some big ideas. We have 5 big ideas to really drive home how LEED v5 applies to planning. So we're going to go over each of these individually, and then after each one, I will be turning it over to Meghna to share some real-world project examples from our firm here, Evolve Environment Architecture. And you're also welcome to dig into more of these case studies on our website. We will provide links for that at the end. So the 5 categories we're going to cover are first, climate risk and resilience. Second is human health, equity, and well-being. Third, carbon reduction and energy systems, nature, ecology, biodiversity, and the 5th being governance, policy, and implementation. And like Christine mentioned earlier, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to use the chat. Okay, so big idea number 1 is that upfront climate resilience assessments are now required in version 5. This process of first and foremost assessing the hazards that are particular to your site is a new requirement. So it really is a major change. And the idea here is that by understanding the risks that are particular to your site, you can help to shape more data-driven strategies towards adaptation. The first step is, of course, understanding. So completing that assessment. There are tools for doing this in a degree of complexity, and we will share one of those with you. It can go from simple lookup tools to intensive climate risk modeling. But the idea is to identify the top 2 prevailing risks that are particular to your site. This might be flooding, it might be extreme temperatures, it might be wildfires, depending on where you're located. That is the first step, is to understand. The second is to recognize that some communities and some populations are more at risk and more vulnerable to these climate impacts than others. So by the end of this process, you will have an understanding of what the prevailing risks are using climate modeling data, who is most at risk, and then being ready to develop mitigation strategies and adaptation measures around that. A great real-world application of this is the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan. So I will pass it to Meghna to talk through some of that work.
Well, thank you, Grace. So here's a quick overview of the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan and how we utilized a climate impacts assessment for its engagement process. So a climate action plan traditionally quantifies greenhouse gas emissions and identifies reduction opportunities within a set boundary. And Pennsylvania releases a climate action plan every 3 years, and it is also heavily based on the climate impacts assessment report, which is also released every 3 years. So we are not only looking at emissions data, we are layering it up with an assessment of observed, projected, and future natural hazards for climate resilience. So these are often visualized through a mapping exercise, which leads to a hazard risk rating based on exposure, sensitivity, adaptive capacity, and vulnerability. So in the next slide, you can see that as engagement specialists on this project, we started identifying geographic areas vulnerable to these hazards and populations requiring targeted adaptation strategies. So we ended up dividing the state into 8 pieces based on population density, EJ designated areas, places dealing with energy transition, industrial pollution, and with low internet access. The state DEP then prioritized 8 such locations, one within each piece, to carry out engagement activities. So, as you can see with this project, the climate impact assessment coupled with engagement strategies is a great tool to reach or target vulnerable populations. And with that, we have a quick exercise in the next slide. So, Grace, back to you.
Yeah, so if you'd like to try this out for yourself, there's a free tool provided by the US government. So it's resilience.climate.gov. I think the link will be shared in the chat. But by entering an address into this climate mapping tool, you will then be able to see the left side panel populate with the specific hazards for your location. So something to consider is what are the specific hazards in your area? Maybe you have a project in mind that you would like to apply this to, and what might some planning relevant design and development decisions be to mitigate some of those risks? So moving on to big idea number two, we have design for the community. So the second new prerequisite in V5 is a human impact assessment. And here projects are asked to leverage human impact data that supports quality of life improvements and ensures equitable access to resources, housing, and mobility. Designing for the community begins by understanding what the community actually needs. And even before that, who is the community? In LEED V5, teams are asked to think about those impacts in early pre-design and planning phases. So when we look through that lens of human impacts, we're able to see opportunities where our designs can begin to better serve communities. This can show up in a number of different ways. One might be in mobility planning. So thinking about how do people get around? Do they have access to public transportation, multimodal options, whether it's walking, biking, or scooters? The second is do they have access to resources? So are there amenities nearby? Do they cover basic needs? Is there anything missing? Maybe a farmer's market or a playground? Thinking broader about the communities that we serve and what resources are in place to serve their needs. And Meghna talked about environmental justice. When we think about human impacts of design, what are the downstream effects of planning decisions, either that we can control directly or maybe we can influence through our planning and engagement work? So, by looking at this lens of human impacts, we can really start to see a much more robust picture take shape when we think about planning. And another illustration of this in practice, Meghna is going to talk about Evolve's work on the Soulbury Township Energy Transition Plan.
Thank you, Grace. So this is another typology of project that we do within our studio at Evolve. So this is an energy transition plan for a township on the eastern side of the state called Soulbury. So the township has a goal to transition to clean, renewable energy by 2050. So we identified 8 strategies as a part of the implementation work plan, but they were evaluated against 8 human impact categories that the community would benefit from. So this impact assessment also helped the community see beyond emissions to confirm what their strengths are, take stock of what their current assets are. And in the next slide, you will see that we did a strategy evaluation exercise with them to understand the potential of each strategy beyond emissions, like noise quality, active transportation, local infrastructure investments, preservation of natural habitats, energy costs, or even community identity. So, this helped us prioritize strategies and actions which are the most important to the community. This is where project development is guided by a thorough understanding of the social context of the local community, its workforce, to address potential future social inequities within our plan. So as you can see, like a human impacts assessment does make the planning projects like more robust in the way we are addressing the well-being of an entire community. And then we have another big idea for you, Grace.
Yes. Yes. Big idea number three is that Upfront carbon assessments, so you might be seeing a theme here, are now required as part of the LEED project process. So earlier in the introduction, you may remember the slide that showed decarbonization is tied to 50% of points in LEED, LEED V5. So naturally, the way to achieve decarbonization is to plan for it and plan for it early. So a carbon assessment is now a requirement for all LEED projects, looking not just at your footprint today, but 25 years out, with current design, current expectations. What is the footprint projected into the future? So this exercise helps to lead more informed decarbonization planning that considers both operational and embodied carbon. Through this process, you're able to develop an inventory of where your carbon sources are, the percent of each, and through that reveal where the hotspots are for optimizing your plans towards decarbonization. So the second piece of this that is a new requirement in V5 is this concept of embodied carbon. So the baked in carbon that comes from materials, manufacturing, and construction processes, LEED project teams are now asked to assess this as part of their carbon inventory. So that means looking at documents and product data like environmental product declarations. It also means using software tools related to life cycle modeling to be able to see that the carbon impact of development actually has relation deeper into the supply chain that is a story that's not often told. So in V5, big shift here is introduction of embodied carbon as a requirement. The third piece to this is looking at opportunities for decarbonization, especially at the planning scale. By having an understanding of where your hotspots are, you then have more of an opportunity to influence planning and design decisions around the goal of decarbonization. Whether it's density-driven development or transit-oriented development, think about ways how this kind of process might influence some of the infrastructure and community design plans that you're either working on or would like to work on in the future. But to see these concepts in practice, Meghna is going to show another example of the eco-district planning process next here.
Thanks, Grace. So this is an eco-district planning project in Millvale within Pittsburgh. So eco-districts are communities that have committed to achieving ambitious environmental sustainability as well as performance goals. So they're often through physical systems of places or social and cultural resiliency as well. So one of the strategies were to make Millvale a self-reliant urban solar village. And as we know, energy resiliency relies on two main strategies: energy conservation and energy production at the same time. So that is what we tried to assess on a community scale through potential energy use reduction strategies, solarization of commercial, industrial, institutional, and residential buildings within the boundary to offset their own energy demands. And then at the end, creating energy hubs to pool solar resources, especially during climate emergencies. And in the next slide, you'll see that we are not only concentrating on the quantitative benchmarking and the measures, as you see on the left, but we're also understanding the impacts of a community for these district scale opportunities. So, how will it change the business district for the better? How can a co op solar farm function within a community like this? Or how will the community even respond to such an infrastructure upgrade? So these planning principles are tied to these low carbon and energy systems that drive decarbonization on such a community scale. And then we have idea number 4, Grace.
Thanks, Meghna. Big idea number 4 in V5 is that shifting a mindset shift really from conservation to active restoration. So this idea again of not just doing less bad or less harm, but actively restoring the sites where our projects take place. So this concept helps to revitalize natural habitat corridors while addressing human and environmental needs through nature-based infrastructure. Um, the kind of thinking and mindset that comes out of this is that there are co-benefit strategies that start to emerge to solve both human quality of life challenges at the same time supporting the environment. The first step again is take inventory, understand what are the biodiversity contexts and systems that exist on this site. LEED V5 asks teams to identify natural systems as well as local vegetation and invasive species. It is a new requirement now that you must remove invasive species on your site where your development is taking place. So some questions that might come up through this process is, are there sensitive lands where development should not occur? Are there sensitive or priority species that must be protected through development? And thinking about also how sites are not, they don't exist in isolation. So this comes into play when we think about neighboring communities, but also habitats as well. So thinking about taking stock of the ecological corridors that may be present on your site and how your designs and your plans can support wildlife movement and ecosystem health so that these can exist not against each other, but working together. With nature-based infrastructure, there are overlapping strategies that have co-benefits like stormwater management, like resiliency for thinking about flood protection or heat island reduction, having a portion of your site be usable, open outdoor space where the development can serve both needs of the community while also maintaining the integrity of the natural ecosystem functioning. We have a couple tools that we will show you in a bit here. And Meghna has, I think, an example next from Chemung County.
Thanks, Grace. So yeah, so we recently worked on a resiliency plan for a county in New York State, which had a history of extreme flooding. So almost 45% of all properties in the county have the risk of flooding over the next 30 years, including Elmira, which is one of the main cities which is located within this valley. So the plan came up with 62 measures to make the county more resilient. One of the properties that were identified, one of the priorities that were identified was to maintain and strengthen natural systems that are wetlands, forests, and green urban spaces especially due to their ability to absorb flood waters and support diversity. And in the next slide, you'll see like when these landscapes are weakened, communities become more susceptible to flooding, erosion, poor air and water quality, and loss of vital ecosystem services that actually underpin public health and climate resilience. So this may manifest in planning as a green water infrastructure plan or a master plan, natural systems management plans for parks, agricultural soil and water conservation incentives within municipalities as well. So understanding the habitat connectivity in the communities that you work should is of utmost importance because planning and development does not exist in isolation. And with that, we have a quick tip in the next slide.
Yeah, so the American Forest has developed a tree equity score. You may be familiar with this, but the idea is that trees have a lot of co-benefits. It's a great strategy to explore further in your area. You can scan the QR code or click on the link to see what this looks like. But there are certain priority areas that have been identified as priority, depending on the level and quality of tree coverage that they have. So this is based on mapping data, but also census data to really focus in on what those priority zones and neighborhoods are. Okay, bringing it on home with the fifth big idea. So big idea number 5 is to set the standard. So use LEED v5 as a planning playbook to align zoning, mobility, and comprehensive plans with best practices. So thinking about LEED as a best practice framework is a great tool to reference whether you're working to develop comprehensive plans, long-term vision documents, or strategy documents, mobility plans that consider the human impacts, but also decarbonization, as we talked about. The third element here is that you may be involved on a project where you're looking to develop something that's more tailored, more customized. LEED still serves you well here as a best practice reference, especially when you're looking at integrating existing processes and systems at an organizational scale to some of these concepts and goals that LEED has identified for us. The U.S. Green Building Council puts a lot of effort into developing the credits, the requirements, the way points are weighted and structured by involving stakeholders and technical expert committees. So there's a lot of value in leveraging that work and using the strategies as a best practice benchmark for your projects. The mandatory minimum requirements for LEED that we touched on today are a good place to start. And the 3 main lenses that we covered in carbon assessments, climate resiliency, and human impacts really form the foundation of robust planning that can then be leveraged for better project outcomes and better performance. So we at Evolve worked with the Pennsylvania Department of General Services to develop a tailored set of sustainability guidelines that works within their existing processes. So Meghna will talk through that.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. So this is our big last project to share. So the State Department of General Services is a central authority for state capital projects, and they work with client agencies to plan, fund, and deliver building and infrastructure projects within the Commonwealth. So each agency has a different requirement and funding need from DGS. It was important to understand their individual processes and find out a way which would not constrict them within a particular framework. So we used LEED, Green Globes, and other frameworks as a benchmark for strategy harvesting to tailor and customize how DGS delivers projects for its agencies. And in the next slide, you'll see that we had 9 priority categories with strategy guidance and success metrics all chalked out for them. So this went on to establish minimum standards for energy efficiency, carbon reduction goals, and resilience that can be coordinated across these different departments within the state. So having an integrated policy framework definitely aligns standalone projects to find success in a holistic manner. And with that, Grace is going to wrap it up.
All right. So yeah, so thank you, Meghna. Thank you everyone for listening. We're going to recap here. You will not be quizzed, but just to tie it all together, how LEED v5 applies to planning. Hopefully your wheels are spinning in how these concepts relate to your work. We covered 5 big ideas in these categories. Number 1, climate risk and resiliency. 2, human health, equity, and well-being. 3, decarbonization through energy systems, nature, ecology, and biodiversity, and the fifth one being governance, policy, and implementation. We also covered Evolve case studies and are happy to talk more about any of that work if you do have questions. We want to pivot, though, to how all of this is relevant and applicable to you and your professional goals. A lot of these concepts translate into skill sets that you can start to develop within your work and with your own educational plan. So we have a few ideas here for what some of those skill sets may be. And as you continue to engage with this material, thinking about how to translate the concepts and the goals in LEED V5 is something that will be really, really valuable as you look to your next professional step. So using LEED V5 in your career as a tool, thinking about your resume, how you can enhance that with the cutting edge of where the U.S. Green Building Council is currently. Thinking about your portfolio work, how you might extract some of these concepts that are really in demand and really relevant, solving some of the most pressing and social and environmental challenges, and developing multidisciplinary leadership. So as a planner, you work with all kinds of groups and stakeholders. LEED through the integrated design process is a great conversation starter in your future meetings when you're looking at how these different elements all interact with each other. And as you may engage with some of these assessments, you'll find that you need to talk to a lot of people to figure out the answers or to collect the data that you need to develop the most appropriate design solution. We want to leave you with some actions that you can take today. So number one being to explore the educational resources that are available through the U.S. Green Building Council and its educational partners. So we will be leaving you with some links to engage with. For anyone who is a student, also consider taking the LEED Green Associate exam while you can, because the discounts for students are pretty significant. It would be really beneficial to, if that's a path you want to go down, set a date for when you want to take the exam, and then work backwards from there with a study plan. The second action you can take today is to look at the assessments that we have shared, some of these free tools that are available, the Tree Equity Score, the Climate Resilience Map, and consider using them on your next project. These are, again, good conversation starters and a good way to start building out that data you need to make more informed decisions. Third here, we covered some potential skills you might look to build in your career. So thinking about how you can present that on your resume and also on your LinkedIn, tying back to some of these concepts that we've covered. And the last one here is think about leading or participating in planning charrettes. A lot of these decisions are really most valuable in the planning phase. And so if you can be a voice in those meetings or even a leader and facilitator, that is where a lot of the value of this really starts to emerge when you start asking these key questions as projects are being developed. A few resources that we are leaving you with from the USGBC's website. There's a lot of educational content around V5, including the rating system guides if you'd like to dig in further. The APA SCD tools as well has planning toolkits, policy templates, resources for you to engage with. And then we'd also like you to point you to our website where we are constantly updating the work we do. And we also have a newsletter that if you'd like to sign up for and kind of keep tabs on what Evolve is doing, that would be another way for us to keep in touch and to engage with our work in the future. And with that, I think we can shift to the Q&A portion of today's session.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Grace. Maybe we can get everybody's faces back up here on the screen. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Rosenblum. I lead the Climate and Sustainability Studio with Evolve EA, where I work very closely with Meghna and Grace. And I'm going to be moderating our Q&A today. We already have a lot of great questions in the Q&A box. I encourage you to keep putting those in there. But I'm going to kick us off with just a couple of quick questions before moving into the audience questions. And Grace, feel free to stop sharing screen if you'd like, so that way we can see everyone's faces a little bit bigger. Excellent. So my first question is for Grace, Meghna, and Tyler, so you can think about this. But curious, you talked about the changes in LEED v5 compared to previous iterations. You talked through some big ideas here. I'm curious what you think is the most impactful change compared to those previous iterations, or what is kind of one thing about LEED v5 that you are most excited about?
Okay, I can take a stab at this. I do think that the requirement now for projects to conduct a carbon assessment is really revolutionary. So if you work in sustainability, you are most likely carbon literate, but it's not something that really is widely provided on every single project. It really does add a lot of value to those early planning and development decisions when you're looking at design A versus design option B. Typically, these are compared on a cost basis. But the requirement now to introduce greenhouse gas and carbon emissions impact into that picture, I think really has a lot of potential impact with how we might start to actually see the groundwork being laid for real decarbonization. So I think that's exciting. And also, if you're looking at skills development, I think it's a great skill to know how to develop and interpret greenhouse gas inventories in the work that you do.
I would echo that, and I think that the carbon assessment is the most impactful personally. And I think that I really value the switch from solely operational emissions to embodied emissions. And I think that because of the world we live in, that many of operational emissions are already so efficient and so successful, and that by switching this focus to more of the embodied emissions and the carbon associated with our built environment and the materials, that will have a greater impact and reach an untapped market.
I feel like planners have the ability to zoom out from a building, like a standalone building project. So by shifting the conversation from energy to carbon, it kind of forces us to address like how the carbon emissions factor for each of the regions change. So not only energy reduction, that doesn't it's not the only thing that matters, but it also matters how your region is generating that energy and where you should put in your resources to kind of assess it and evaluate it. So I think the change in the way that we are addressing decarbonization is really interesting, and I'm excited to see what comes next out of this.
Very good. A lot of exciting things here. One more question for you before we move to the audience Q&A. Grace and Meghna, I know you guys have managed many LEED projects. I'm curious, with the change to LEED v5 from the consultant's perspective, what do you have to do differently as part of the process when pursuing LEED v5? So more of like a logistical or consultant's perspective.
Yeah, I think something that we're incorporating into our workflows into our project management practice is kind of boring, but it's a process thing where we now understand that there has to be more robust upfront planning and assessment and evaluation that takes place. So we already are, big proponents of integrated design processes. Every project starts with a kickoff, a design charrette, where you bring all the different stakeholders and project team into a room or a virtual room, and you talk about what the goals are. So that's still the same. That's not changing. It's still valuable. It's even more valuable now. What is changing is that the context window that we bring into those meetings are a little bit broader. So now we're going to be talking about climate resiliency. What are the climate risks particular to our site? We're going to be talking about carbon assessment, but in a more data-driven way. So there's more upfront data that we now need to bring to those early meetings and workshops. And then, of course, the human impact assessment is another piece to that. So it's asking different questions on top of the questions we already do ask. I think something that I'm personally interested in too is like I mentioned, telling the story of the supply chain and having that be a way to influence procurement and how materials are sourced and where they're sourced from, and asking those questions to reveal some of the hidden ethical and carbon impacts that we see in the supply chain too.
I kind of see it as so one or two credits that they have added is based on how your building affects the community around it. So your impact is not only restricted to the site you're on, but it's also how or what it's contributing to the community members around you. And I feel like as architects or designers on the process, that kind of pushes the boundary of kind of understanding like how whatever you're designing is impacting the world around you. So we might have to introduce some community stakeholders within this practice as well, which we have never really considered for LEED before.
Great. So definitely some new things to consider here in the switch to LEED v5. All right. Well, we've got a lot of questions in the Q&A box. I'm not sure we'll have time for all of them, but we're going to do our best. I believe we have the Zoom room here until 2:30, so a lot of time here to discuss some questions. So I'm going to combine two of these questions because they are both asking about climate impact assessments. So this might be one for either Grace or for Magna. So we have a question here. Can a climate impact assessment be as simple as using the National Risk Index to look at hazards in vulnerable populations, or does it help for an area to have a climate action plan to reduce the burdens for developers pursuing LEED certifications? And then with that, we had another question here. How does a statewide climate impact assessment relate to LEED certification for individual sites?
So the first question, LEED or the USGBC is providing a template tool, an Excel-based tool to conduct your climate impact or climate resiliency assessment. They encourage you to use freely available, publicly available data sets like the IPCC. So there's kind of tiers of approaching this. There's the quick and fast way, easy way, free way, which is taking advantage of those free lookup tools by plugging in your address, your site location, and revealing what hazards come up. You can go the other end of the spectrum where you're conducting climate modeling, and that's a whole other bag to consider. But I think the message here is to not be scared about these new requirements. It seems like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work, but the USGBC really wants to push the market a little bit, but is also providing that first step to make it easy for you to have a basis to work with. So I hope that answers somewhat the question.
All right, very good. So the next question I have here, I think could be answered by by any of the three of you, whoever feels most compelled to answer. Question is, how is V5 impacted by the changes in the federal government over 2025 and forward?
I think LEED remains a voluntary program. So in terms of uptake and how we expect, LEED certified buildings or projects to continue, I think there are certain corporate entities, there are certain institutions who still have in their design and construction standards, LEED is a minimum standard, or sometimes LEED is a stretch goal. So again, it goes back to your organizational values, your priorities, and the extent that LEED is a benchmark framework in that regard. LEED is designed to be better than code, and better than code typically means higher performing buildings. So I think certainly with federal programs, everyone's watching to see how this is having, an impact on actual projects. But LEED tends to kind of bubble up to the surface when the goal at the outset is high performance. So I think it differs depending on the project type and how it's funded. But the conversations we try to steer is, what are your priorities, and is LEED the right framework that can help you achieve those goals?
All right, great. Megna or Tyler, is there anything you want to add to that, or did Grace just about capture it?
I think Grace did a great job.
Yeah.
All right, very good. All right, the next question we have here is about embodied carbon. So with embodied carbon being considered, do you anticipate that this will help to encourage the reuse of materials and rehabilitation of existing structures?
I hope so. I hope so. I think Megna can speak a lot to this too, because she has been working on some life cycle assessment models for one of our building projects. But there's a new credit in the materials and resource category that is honing in on exactly that. So reuse is a great embodied carbon strategy, whether it's reuse of a building itself, or reusing existing materials or furniture. If you are going to the level of modeling, it does have a lot of benefit there. So that's always a good first question is, can we reuse this? So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like LCAs are going to be something that the industry will be moving towards in most of its projects, and LEED has different requirements for building construction, like new building construction and interiors as well. So reusing a whole building might fall under the IDC, the Interior Design and Construction certification. But of course, then also you will have the opportunity to show a decrease in embodied carbon by reusing furniture, or reusing internal walls, movable walls, and things of that nature. And we have been seeing like architects being more open to the idea of renegotiating materials with the clients way before construction starts, so during the specification stage of the project. So these things are evolving and moving towards a more positive outcome.
All right, very good. All right, so our next question here, what is the difference between past site restoration criteria and those that now apply? And then also, what is the difference between the past VOC criteria and those applied under big idea number 3, the embodied carbon big idea?
I think so. In V5, you are required to remove invasive species on your site, which was not the case before. there are new opportunities, not requirements, to support things like pollinator gardens. Like that's more explicitly laid out in the sustainable sites credit. For VOCs, the credits for materials have now been combined. So in the past, projects would document the BPDO, Building Product Disclosure Optimization credits, in one chunk, one Excel sheet, and then the low emitting would be in another. These are now combined. So if you're interested in materials, I would definitely encourage you to look at how V5 now has a new product weighting, a new score for materials as a whole. So there's a new multi-attribute score that that considers the VOC content also alongside some of the other criteria like circular economy, recycled content, low carbon in one place. The VOCs have gotten a little bit more stringent in how it's weighted, where you now have to have 100% VOCs for 3 core categories, if I remember correctly. And so that would also be part of the equation. So hopefully that makes sense. Another big thing I'll point everyone to is the Common Materials Framework, CMF. There's been a lot of feedback from just users of LEED and project teams about how this whole material ecosystem is really complicated. So there are efforts to streamline it, and that's a great place to go if you want to dig into how the criteria is evolving.
All right, great. So our next question here is for Meghna. It's about the Solbury project. Will this policy and process be included in Solbury Township's new comprehensive plan? So maybe you want to talk a little bit about, who's driving, the project you mentioned, how that relates to the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I'm so excited someone asked this question because the answer is yes. So we do have a few priority strategies which are directly a part of the comprehensive plan, like the active transportation plan or resiliency mapping within the township. So we do have a focus group who is working on the energy transition plan, and we have quite an overlap with that team. With the comprehensive plan and also with the county hazard mitigation plan. So there are 2 or 3 big strategies which are being reviewed by our team as well, which are chapters within the comprehensive plan. So we made sure that most of these strategies are not just like a plan on a shelf, but we specifically want them to implement them within the community. So that's something we take a lot of care at Evolve, especially at the end of the project. We make sure that some of these strategies are implementable and are ready to go right from the beginning.
All right, very good. We've got a couple questions here around the Millvale Eco District project. First one is, are thermal energy networks included in the Eco District planning? And then the other is for Millvale, since the second largest producer of CO2 in Pennsylvania was transportation, how or did the plan address transportation systems? Meghna, maybe I'll take a stab at this question unless there's anything you'd like to contribute here. And to just say for the first point about the thermal energy networks, Millvale is a very dense existing community that sits at the bottom of a watershed. So they experience a lot of flooding issues. But we did not look into thermal energy networks, in particular underground energy networks, because of that existing dense fabric and also some of the kind of property ownership considerations there. Instead, we were looking more at some of the microgrid networks and such that Meghna had mentioned. In regards to the second question around transportation systems, the Eco District planning actually focused on 6 different quality of life areas: energy, water, and food, and then mobility, air quality, and equity being its own category, but also an umbrella over the other 5 categories. So mobility was an area of focus here, and I do appreciate this question, recognize that that is, transportation systems are such a big part of our emissions that we absolutely need to address it in these planning projects. And as part of the plan under mobility, we focused a lot on how to incorporate or how to encourage active transportation. And Millville is actually undergoing a focused active transportation planning effort at this moment. I believe it kicked off about a month ago to further kind of figure out how to encourage, walkability, bikeability, and access to public transportation. Also looking at how to increase safety and slowing vehicles down and things of that nature. But Millville's got some great connectivity opportunities. It's right off of a riverfront trail, which is great for biking, and very close to downtown Pittsburgh. So yes, absolutely did think about transportation systems and mobility as part of that effort. All right. A lot of good questions here. We've got another one here about embodied carbon. How should one balance the emphasis on embodied carbon with the push to build millions more homes to address the housing shortage? So kind of a bigger scale, maybe existential question here. And maybe this is one that all 3 of you or one of the 3 of you has an opinion
Um, we've been hearing about modular construction, even prefab, with the baseline of embodied carbon in V5 is to optimize your structure, enclosure, and hardscape materials. So I think that both can be achieved, with smart material procurement strategies, smart selection with embodied carbon in mind, whether it's the materials you're choosing or the method of building. There are certainly opportunities there. But I don't know if maybe Megna, if you have other thoughts on that.
I mean, yes, population growth and development are of course variables that we always take into account when we are making like projections based on like for the community. So I think in larger planning projects, which is definitely supported by like maybe a housing assessments plan for a county or a city, it would be nice to see like a apples to apples comparison in what the municipality is promising in terms of their carbon footprint and what development they are proposing is balanced. So I feel it's an interesting conversation to have. But of course, we should not definitely subtract the idea of development, which is going to go on whether or not we like it, and a population boost within the world.
Tyler, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this, the balance of the need for more housing versus embodied carbon, or if Grace and Magna have covered it.
I really like what Grace and Megan said, but to tail off of Grace, I think that designing for decommissioning is an idea that needs to be implemented more often. And I think that that is like a great way to balance the embodied carbon needs with the housing shortage. So just like the reallocation of materials and being able to have buildings serve a purpose and then serve a different purpose, I think is super crucial. And we'll see that evolving as we go.
All right, very good. All right, our next question here. There seems to be more required assessments in LEED v5. Is it fair to say that the administrative burdens of pursuing LEED in this version have increased as they became more holistic?
I think this question comes up a lot, and I think it's going to actually documenting a LEED v5 project is when you'll have like the real data of what that experience is like. But what I can say is that some credits, yes, there are new templates to fill out, new assessments to complete. The burden is not super high again because USGBC wants to keep the barrier to entry low. But there's a balance because some of the other credits where the documentation burden currently is quite high, like materials, that has been consolidated. So I think where there's some new worksheets to fill out, new assessments to complete, there could be, a kind of balanced approach with some of the other credits. Another thing too is I'm excited to actually use the new platform. So USGBC is merging LEED Online, which is the current portal where everything is documented, with ARC. ARC is the performance portal for when a LEED project goes from certification to now it's occupied and it's a real project. So there's a consolidation happening in the back end of how projects are documented. And I think there's going to be a lot of increased efforts to keep things as streamlined as they can be. And also curious to see how AI might be integrated to help some of that burden along as well.
All right, good. Still have a handful more questions here, so I'll keep us rolling through. Next question, how does LEED v5 fit into the LEED GA certification? So for example, does LEED GA certification demonstrate competency with LEED v5?
I can take that one. So right now we have the LEED v4 exams still occurring. And so LEED v4 exams using the LEED v4 framework will be up until April 26th. But then after that, the exams will transition to more LEED v5 content. That's not to say that they're entirely new exams because the themes and some of the credit categories will be carried over, but there will be more of an emphasis on what we've spoken about and the decarbonization, quality of life, and ecological restoration, as well as the specific impact assessments that need to be done. So April 26th is the last day to focus solely on LEED v4 if you want to do those LEED Green Associate exams. But after that, we think would be valuable to start studying up on LEED v5 as that's going to be the new wave. And so yeah, just take the test whenever possible. But we think that after April 26th would be great to get that hands-on experience with LEED v5.
Great, thank you, Tyler. All right, so our next question here, any suggestions on how local governments can incentivize these sustainability strategies for new development? We previously created a sustainability checklist based on LEED into our development code for new development, but we received a lot of pushback from the development community due to increased costs associated with implementing many of the strategies. So thoughts on how local governments can incentivize these sustainability strategies for new development?
I think, requirements and mandates are tricky. They do tend to have be met with pushback because it's really important to allow for customized solutions. And some people think that, the LEED box is restricting in some way. A way to kind of shift the conversation, I think, is to really focus on performance again. Code, getting LEED as a standard in code is a great option, but where there's pushback, I think if you're able to create a benchmark that is performance based, whether it's energy, utilities, if you're able to get a carbon assessment in there, or some of these other criterias like resiliency, or human impacts, where you're tying the requirement to an indicator or a metric versus an entire framework, there might be some wins to achieve through that kind of approach. I know people have different thoughts on like incremental achievement of some of these goals versus like whole scale. I think incremental where we can get it is better than nothing. So it might be that energy and water goals and resiliency, those all make sense for 90% of projects. But without the documentation required for some of the other LEED requirements. I think being able to be flexible, I think is how to kind of steer projects along. And understanding that everyone has a different context. It's not always that they're against the environment. It might be a cost thing, like the question said. So introducing these standards and these benchmarks is always valuable. I think steering it again to how the building or how the site is going to perform, tying it to data, that's always, I think, a good way to kind of achieve some of these goals without, strict mandates that apply across the board in every case. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I would like to add, like, some of these things came up when we were doing the Solberry Township Energy Transition Plan project, because, like, taking a step back from LEED V5, how do we even convince a community to get on board with these strategies? And they did think about putting out ordinances for incentives. So there is another township right next to Solberry called Doylestown who have implemented the Green Point system. So if you have checked off a certain, like, things off a certain checklist that the community has prioritized, it doesn't need to be lead specific, but just what the community prioritizes. Then you get discounts on the total square footage you can build, or the number of floors that you can build, or even a dollar amount discount on their whole submission process to the municipality. So that's one way smaller townships are looking at it, which is kind of interesting. So yeah.
Very good. Good thoughts here. All right, we have a couple questions around transportation, so I'm going to ask these together. First one, rather than transportation just being incorporated into the planning phase, how are buildings adding walk, bike, and transit infrastructure? And the second question here, another transportation question. Since personal vehicle car parking uses approximately 30% of land use, which is usually paved, how is that being addressed? So how are we incorporating walk, bike, and transit infrastructure into these projects? And then any thoughts about the paved parking areas and how those are being addressed?
So yeah, so the walk, bike, and transit has been consolidated now into an active transportation kind of subcategory in the location and transportation credit. So yeah, those methods and modes are incentivized. There's the idea of active transportation is new in V5. Actually, we could have maybe covered a little bit more on that, but current versions just look at bike facilities and related amenities, but now in V5, this is brought in to capture some other modes. And within your carbon assessment, you have the option to count vehicle miles traveled. It's an option, it's not a requirement, but the idea is to try and get projects to think about how people get to your building or your site and do that in a quantified way that ties back into your decarbonization goals. So the incentives are there um, to design your building or your site with those like alternative modes in your plan, because you will see the benefit of that in your decarbonization assessment. And then of course the points are awarded for showing more reductions. And the second question, what was the second one?
It was around the paved parking lots.
Oh, I don't know, Magna, do you have thoughts on that? Paved parking lot, like hardscape?
Yeah, so LEED already previously had the credit and still has it under sensitive uh land sustainable sites credit. Yeah. And it does talk about covered parking lots and using impermeable surfaces, and there is also like the percentage of site which needs to have impervious paving to it. So those things were already a part of LEED previously, and I'm pretty sure they have kept it going. But apart from that, I do not know if it's being addressed in a another way. But as best practice, I think we should definitely uh, go towards covered parking spaces or choosing a paving material which helps with decreasing the heat island effect as well as with water percolation. So those are things that we should definitely keep in mind while designing anything, LEED or no LEED. So yeah.
All right, great. We've got a question here about the point system. So it says you showed how the point system the point system weighting uses the impact scores. Does this mean certain points only carry a weighted score automatically? How does the impact score translate into the LEED certification points?
Um, So if you've seen a LEED scorecard, that it still looks the same. The difference now is that each strategy is put into these three buckets, and the second tab on the Excel sheet is your impact area report. So you'll interact with the scorecard in the exact same way by saying like, yes, we're pursuing this, maybe or no. And then that is automatically rolled up into your impact report. So I think it'll be used in a few different ways. Like one can be if you're looking for funding, it really consolidates the story you're telling about the value of your project. The certification is still awarded based on the points. So that impact area addition, I think, is more of a tool for reporting and kind of speaking about your project. I'm not totally sure if there's any other implications of it beyond that. There is a lot of corporate institutional clients who do ESG reporting, um, do LEED as well. So I think there's sort of influence in that world of where the impact area report is helpful in streamlining some of that work. But yeah, I will look into that a little bit more.
And we also have a question here. Will the platinum, gold, and silver certifications continue under LEED v5?
They are the same tiers, but platinum now means something a little bit different. So the current versions, you can achieve platinum in any mixture of credits and points as long as you have the minimum required. Now in V5, there's a new threshold, a higher bar for achieving platinum. So one of the criteria is that you cannot have any on-site combustion. So all electrification. You must also have a 20% reduction in embodied carbon. Um, so there's been a lot of feedback from projects about how uh, you know you could have a LEED Platinum building in one city, LEED Platinum building in another city, but completely different profiles in terms of utilities or how they function. This is an effort to make it more comparable, to raise the bar on what it means to be platinum, but then also have it be benchmarked to this idea that there should be no emissions tied to a LEED platinum building. So it's going to be interesting to see how many we get as a result. But hopefully there are, ambitious projects out there that want to go for it.
All right, great. Another question here. This is, I think, a follow-up from the question about the changes at the federal level and how that impacts LEED. But more specifically, how do the changes to things like Justice 40 and data set availability impact V5? So are there tools or other things held at the federal level where if those were to go away or to change, would that impact LEED v5?
I've seen people talking about this on LinkedIn. Yes, a lot of those data sets, I believe, are not there anymore. But Harvard apparently has a archived resource, and I apologize, I don't have the link right now, but maybe if you Google, you can find where you can still access the previous data sets and still use that as a basis. Megna, do you have any more direct experience with that?
Yeah, there are some state tools that are still available, even though the maps and the GIS sets have been taken down, but they still have the methodology and the data sets on their portal. So that's one thing. The second thing is like environmental justice scores are a accumulation or a calculation which is based off census demographic data at the end of the day. So as long as you have that along with pollution metrics or health impact metrics, you can still make a pretty strong case even without an EJ score. So yeah, so there are ways that you can address environmental justice within communities.
Okay, very good. I know we just have a few minutes left here. I'm going to read a couple more things here from the Q&A and then hand it back to Christine for a few final words. But we had a question here. What is the main flooding source for Chemung County that you worked on the resilience plan? I can say, there's several kind of streams that run throughout Chemung County, but there's also the Chemung River, where when there are heavy storm events, that river can rise. There are also some dams along that river that potentially could be compromised in the future as a flooding source. The city of Elmira also sits in a valley, so it receives all of that kind of stormwater runoff and everything coming from upstream, which is another source of flooding there. We also have a comment here in response to the housing conversation saying more LEED multifamily equals sustainable choice for the affordable housing crisis. Incentivize through land costs and allow more density to be economically feasible. Great comment and thought there. And I think there might be a couple more in here that we didn't get to, but we will have access to those following the webinar. So we'll make sure to follow up with those that we didn't have the chance to answer. But I do want to thank Tyler, Grace, and Magna for a great presentation and a great conversation. And Christine, I know we had another question here about not being able to find the
We're
this
working
course on the
on
APA.
it.
So
I
I'll
will
pass
have
it back
that
to you.
out. I promise it is approved. I'm just waiting for the CM number to come back from my APA staff person. So that will be up on our website, I promise, within probably the hour. ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. Don't forget, this session has been recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and we'll pop up. Thanks, everybody. This was a great conversation. And thanks to all of our panelists and to the Sustainable Communities Division of APA. We thank you always. To everyone, thank you and have a great weekend. And we'll talk next time.
Thank you
Great,
so
thank you
much.
all.